Following the German defeat in World War I, Kaiser Wilhelm ended 500 years of Hohenzollern rule with his abdication, as Germany democratized after the liberal victory in the November Revolution. Despite the monarchist leanings of the German National People's Party, DNVP, the Weimar Republic was initially governed by the Social Democratic Party, SPD, who removed the monarchy. When the right finally rose to power, it rallied not behind the Hohenzollern Kaiser, but the National Socialist Führer. Numerous overtures were made by the NSDAP to win over monarchists, and some royalists hoped the monarchy could be reinstated in some capacity, but the Führer further consolidated power, leading Germany to the disaster in the Second World War. So join me, you over 47,000 Kaiserliche and the 90% who haven't subscribed yet. History was forever changed as the Kaiser learned that the war was unwinnable in August 1918, so immediately set about to save his family's status and the future of Germany. Communication with the Americans made it clear that the monarchy needed to be drastically reduced, and it was soon evident that Wilhelm needed to abdicate. Plans were concocted within the highest echelons, as the October constitutional reforms changed the empire into a parliamentary monarchy, akin to Great Britain. The popular Friedrich Ebert, a member of the majority Social Democratic Party of Germany, MSPAD, was appointed the chancellor. While a socialist, Ebert and his supporters had earned the nickname of Good Socialists during the war for their support, so his plan to appoint Wilhelm's fourth son, 31-year-old Prince August Wilhelm, as a new Kaiser of Germany was accepted by Wilhelm II, who hung up the Pickelhaube as his toughest battles were now with his afternoon nap schedule. This was all in line with the designs of Paul von Hintz, the State Secretary of Foreign Affairs, and his revolution from above, hoping to obtain a lenient peace with the Entente and laying seeds for the military failure at the hands of the socialists in the Reichstag, so Hindenburg and Ludendorff supported it. August Wilhelm was hurriedly proclaimed the Kaiser of Germany, embracing his role as a liberal monarch and promising his people to secure peace with the Entente, distancing himself from his father and his regime, garnering support from the military.
I love democracy. I love the Republic.
He was immediately challenged with the outbreak of the November Revolution, as socialists and communists looked to overthrow the government, and many feared another Russian civil war was emerging in Germany. This fear allowed the British, the main supporters of keeping the Hohenzollerns, to convince their allies that they should. After all, in Russia, supposed Democrats, or at least as democratic as 1910's Russia could get, took power after the Tsar's abdication, but they were too weak, allowing the communists to rise. 12 million deaths later, and the Bolsheviks ended up in control of Russia after the Civil War. If the Entente forced the new Kaiser out, Marxists would seize Germany and take all of Europe down with it. August Wilhelm entered discussions with the Entente, pointing to the thousands of Germans who were still fighting the communists in the east to cull Bolshevism. Germany was no longer their enemy, the Marxists were, conveniently ignoring Wilhelm's role in their ascent by sending Lenin to sow chaos in Russia. If the Marxists seized power, reparations would never be paid, while he swore to repay damages inflicted by the Germans. While France rejected this notion as absurd, Britain won America and Italy over, easing the blockade on Germany as August Wilhelm became the face for a new Germany. Instead of listening to any of the valid complaints of the revolutionaries, Germany, known for its totally chill and reasonable response to political turmoil, decided the best way to fix things was more monarchy. So the Kaiser set about kaisering all over the place, crushing the various Bolshevik republics, rooting out the Marxists with the aid of the Reichswehr, the Freikorps, the SPD, and numerous conservative paramilitaries, cementing his position as the leader of Germany. Within a few weeks, the Spartacus League, the German Communist Party, the International German Communists, and the Revolutionary Stewards were all crushed, as the Reich remained under the Hohenzollerns' leadership, albeit with many constitutional limitations. With the rebels put to rest, the Campania Armistice was signed, ending the war. Imperial victory over the rebels sparked fierce resistance from the Baltic Germans, who fought to preserve their fledgling state. As Article 12 of the Armistice ordered German troops in the east to remain and fight, preventing the Bolsheviks from seizing land, the Baltische Landeswehr, the army of the Curonian and Livonian German nobility, was able to maintain power, dissipating Latvian and Estonian independence efforts as they fought under the West Russian Volunteer Army, because nothing says freedom like foreign nobility stamping out your nationalism. The Regency Council, consisting of 4 Baltic Germans, 3 Estonians, and 3 Latvians, appointed Prince Oskar as their new duke, August Wilhelm's brother, though Germany definitely had no part to play in this appointment. Oskar quickly organized Latvian, Estonian, Baltic German, and released Russian POWs under General Rüdiger von der Goltz in support of Kolchak's White Movement. This was disastrous for Lithuania, as Poland's accusation that they were actually German puppets convinced the Entente, as Germany was already securing the Baltics, so Poland received Entente support, annexing Lithuania before they could form a real government. The Inter-Allied High Commission also instructed the Baltic Duchy to cede Latgalia, a historic Polish region with a large Polish population, to Poland. Back in the West, a few major changes took shape in the Treaty of Versailles to suit the Kaiser's needs. The same war guilt clause was signed, stating, "The Allied and associated governments affirm and Germany accepts the responsibility of Germany and her allies for causing all the loss and damage to which the Allied and associated governments and their nationals have been subjected as a consequence of the war imposed upon them by the aggression of Germany and her allies." Here, however, it was not purposely mistranslated to say, "Germany admits it that Germany and her allies, as authors of the war, are responsible for all losses and damages," so on and so forth, as it didn't serve August Wilhelm to be humiliated in the negotiations. Instead, he needed to look like he duped the Entente. The reparations were technically increased from the 132 billion gold marks, but they were structured to be effectively less than half. Versailles indemnities were divided into three types: A bonds, which Germany needed to quickly repay or face consequences, like the Franco-Belgian Ruhr occupation; B bonds, dependent on Germany's economic recovery; and C bonds, interest-free bonds with no repayment schedule that were never expected to be repaid, basically monopoly money. With that explained, the historic split of 12-38-82 was dramatically restructured to 6-22-120, so while theoretically larger, in reality, it was greatly reduced. Military restrictions still hampered the Germans, as the Rhine demilitarization was now tied to the repayment of the A and B bonds. They were allowed a small air force, medium navy, and tank divisions with a limit of 100,000 troops, while paramilitaries were banned. However, various loopholes were knowingly created for quote-unquote peacekeeping groups like the Freikorps, Einwohnerwehr, and the Black Reichswehr to suppress communism. Additionally, veterans clubs were definitely not secret military training facilities, just clubs where people bond over their shared love of military drills and marching in unison. With Versailles out of the way, the rest of Europe played out in a similar fashion, albeit with a few minor changes. The inclusion of Lithuania into Poland meant Pilsudski's multi-ethnic model already had standing, so more territories were accepted by Poland from the Soviets. In the Balkans, Gabriele D'Annunzio and his Italian thugs were shot when attempting to seize Fiume from Yugoslavia in 1919, humiliating Italy. Unlike Germany, most of Europe saw a massive red wave, proving the Hohenzollerns' value. At the Second Congress of the Comintern in 1920, the socialist-communist split was avoided as its socialists were given more input, leading to a more moderate version of Zinovьev's 21 Conditions, meaning future states could join the Comintern that were not quite in lockstep with Russian Bolshevism. In Italy, the Socialist Party of Italy, PSI, didn't divide between the socialists and communists, strengthening resistance to the Blackshirts. Giovanni Bacci led them to victory in the 1921 election, pressuring the monarchy to crack down on extremism, as the PSI created their own paramilitary, ramping up violence across the Italian peninsula. More alert, the March on Rome was foiled as fascism effectively died, while socialism flourished. In the ever-restless land of the baguette, the French Communist Party, PCF, remained within the French section of the Workers' Internationale, SFIO, as they both backed the Comintern Congress, so the Cartel de Gauche, the Socialist Coalition, won the 1924 elections with Léon Blum of the SFIO serving as the Prime Minister, implementing borderline communist reforms. While the rest of Europe embraced the left, August Wilhelm crushed any such attempts. Historically, he was an extreme conservative and very far right, joining Der Stadthelm, a conservative monarchist group who worked with the DMVP before later joining the NSDAP. Here, similar to other leaders of the day, a cult of personality grew around the Kaiser, unofficially forming the Schwarzer Adlerbund, the Black Eagle League, named after the Prussian Black Eagle. It served as a private army, receiving secret funding from nobles and government industrialists, though August Wilhelm denied any relation. The Reichswehr and Freikorps were strengthened, though most of the military was reclassified outside the government purview to avoid Versailles sanctions, growing loyalty to the Kaiser as he laid the previous disaster at his father's feet. The pre-war aristocracy remained in most cases, though without Bavaria and the other monarchs, the nation became entirely more Prussified, as Prussian aristocracy unofficially ruled. Former monarchs like Karl of Austria or the Bavarian Wittelsbachs lived in Germany, but the old royalty was never reinstated, as he didn't wish to abrogate his limited powers. When the Austrian painter attempted his Bierhall Putsch, the military in Freikorps opposed him, as the military orders planned to use the new Kaiser to do their bidding. The Schwarzer Adlerbund surrounded the insurgents, arresting all, executing their leaders for treason, destroying National Socialism. Communists across the nation received similar treatment, as the Schwarzer Adlerbund and other peacekeeping groups eliminated opposition in government-sanctioned purges, not too dissimilar from the French climate with constant bloodshed. While the Social Democrats were the first ruling party, they were quickly surpassed by the DNVP, with the Kaiser quickly consolidated control, drawing them to the main right-wing party.
Call an ambulance! Call an ambulance! But not for me!
The continuation of the supposedly competent leadership from the pre-war days prevented the 1923 hyperinflation, as they didn't print more money to pay their own people to not work in some moronic attempt at sticking it to France. The A bonds were quickly repaid, while they dragged their feet on the B bonds once they saw the left rising in France. They still struggled to make the repayments as their economy wasn't great, but rejected foreign refinancing attempts once they realized other powers had no means to enforce them. Just as Europe had finally begun to rebound, the Wall Street crash of 1929 shattered the global economy. This shifted Germany to the left as the DNVP was blamed for the economic hardships of unemployment, inflation, bank failures, and lack of foreign investments. In its absence, the SPD took control, instituting socialist reforms, securing deals with America to restructure war debts. Now led by Giacomo Matteotti, the Italians embraced liberal radicalism, forcing the right to coalesce around the monarchy in opposition. As the monarch had constantly hindered their Marxist ambitions, the PSI launched a coup in 1929, eliminating the royals, rallying opposition in the south, and their parliamentary foes, as the coup proceeded effectively. Soon, the police, military, and courts were all rid of the enemies, as the communists had unbridled control over the state, proclaiming the Italian People's Republic. After the failure in the Greco-Turkish War and their economic failures, the KKE, Communist Party of Greece, staunch supporters of the Comintern, came to power in Greece with much Italian and Soviet support. In France, the FSIO had a landslide victory in the 1929 election, pushing outright communist policies popular with the left-wing working class. Maurice Thorez, a Stalinist puppet, served as France's new prime minister, beginning a Bolshevik approach to government which only grew stronger after further victories in the 30s, rooting conservatives out of the government as industries were nationalized alongside land redistribution and purges, all in the name of the people.
Hey, I've seen this one. This is a classic.
Fearing a similar disaster taking place in Germany, August Wilhelm sabotaged most socialist policies to hold on to his power, as he instead focused on repaying the war indemnity so he could quickly remilitarize. This eventually worked as the DNVP and Zentrum coalition formed, where parliament ceded him more power, fearing a similar system as France or Italy where the nations were cannibalizing themselves. Presented as a return to the natural order, propagandizing it as the only way to reassert Germany's rightful place in the world stage, popular slogans said that the Hohenzollerns birthed Germany, and they were the only ones who could lead it. Bismarck's role in the birth of Germany was sidelined as August Wilhelm's great-grandfather, Wilhelm I, was given the official title of Reichsvater, Father of the Reich. This pushed a hyper-nationalist, conservative, militaristic ethos of the new regime, emphasizing the Kaiser's almost divine lineage, symbolizing the restoration of German greatness, similar to how Augustus deified Julius Caesar. Just the same as historically, the German leadership underestimated their new leader and ended up subservient, as August Wilhelm played factions off one another to secure his cause, until he had near absolute control over the state, amassing far more power than any of his constitutionally bound forefathers. The DNVP obeyed his every word. While the Chancellor was less important, he found his Bismarck in August von Mackensen, Germany's best general from the Great War, who was a deeply committed monarchist and very popular with the people. When the Saarland voted to rejoin Germany in 1935, this was seen as a victory for the Kaiser, fueling his popularity further as many called for the full imperial borders to return. While Germany celebrated, France was angered as it seemed as if Germany had no consequences from the Great War, as their economy was surpassing everyone else on the continent. This humiliation and goading from Thorez led to a right-wing military coup in late 1935 in France, hoping to remove the Stalinist cancer. The SFIO expected this and was well prepared, though the right nearly took out much of the communist leadership in a bombing attempt, leaving Thorez horribly scarred. After the assassination attempt failed, the government had all the leeway to achieve their goals. All remaining conservatives in the military or government were purged across the entire French world, as Thorez restructured France.
The attempt on my life has left me scarred.
The Republic will be reorganized into the first galactic empire.
The Third Republic was overthrown from the top as the French Socialist Republic was proclaimed in 1936, horrifying the West. Modeled after the Soviet Union, the totalitarian communist regime shipped political prisoners to the furthest colonies as the General Secretary Thorez firmly controlled France. After this shocking development, Germany immediately remilitarized the Rhine, fearing a French invasion as any military restrictions were quickly abandoned. While successful in Germany, August Wilhelm knew he needed like-minded allies, so worked closely to reinstate Karl I back in Austria and in Hungary. This led to heavy financial support for the Fatherland Front in the 1930s, as they publicly embraced monarchism before Engelbert Dollfuss became the Chancellor. In 1934, the socialist paramilitary attack on the police led to the brief Austrian Civil War, the perfect chance to rush the Habsburgs back into power. In coordination with the Fatherland Front, Karl quickly arrived in Vienna after the bloodshed, took charge of the defense, and oversaw the demolition of the socialists, being hailed as the savior of Austria. With his popularity at an all-time high, Dolphus and a stacked parliament overturned the Habsburg laws, restoring their property before Karl was crowned the Archduke of Austria by Archbishop Theodor Innitzer. Prior to Francis I, Austria was always a duchy, not an empire, and this was done to placate fears of Austrian expansion. To many, the whole ordeal seemed too staged to be real. Many claimed the initial anarchy was caused by covert Schwarzer Adlerbund members agitating the revolt to reinstate the Habsburgs, gaining Germany a loyal ally. The restoration placed Horthy and Hungary under a ton of pressure, as Horthy had treacherously blocked Karl from retaking his throne twice after the Great War. Similar to Austria, Germany had propped up pro-Habsburg monarchist parties since the mid-20s, so Karl's reemergence fractured Hungary. The Unitary Party, officially the Catholic Protestant Farmers, Smallholders and Civic Party, which indirectly was Horthy's regime party, crumbled after the Austrian developments. The conservatives and nationalists lost faith in Horthy, as many expected Karl to march in unopposed at any time, though Karl didn't wish to appear as a conqueror, so he held off. With nearly 70% of Hungary Catholic, the church began pushing a pro-unification message, hoping to increase their power once the full imperial borders were back, so many Catholics joined Archbishop Justinian Szeredy's Catholic People's Party. The idea of the good old days, when Austria and Hungary reigned as a global superpower, appealed the most. After a good showing in the 1935 election, a broad conservative coalition took a supermajority in the parliament. After a few months, the constitution was amended as Habsburg flags waved throughout Hungary. Karl soon arrived in Budapest with much fanfare, as Archbishop Szeredy returned his position as king. Shortly thereafter, a new state, the Habsburg Federal Empire, though many still refer to it as Austria-Hungary, was proclaimed, binding Austria and Hungary together in a federal model, unifying their militaries and economies with autonomy for each constituency.
I thought you were dead.
My death was greatly exaggerated.
Czechoslovakia, Romania, and Yugoslavia immediately panicked as they knew they were next on the chopping block. With the rest of Europe devolving into a communist nightmare, Austria and Germany knew Britain couldn't afford to oppose them annexing Czechoslovakia, as the Brits needed reliable continental partners. The Sudetenland paramilitaries began agitating to join Austria rather than Germany, while pro-Habsburg parties popped up, though Czechoslovakia tended to suppress them. With nearly a third of their population being Hungarians or Germans, both of whom were eager to rejoin the Habsburgs, and the other 20% of the population who were Slovaks who were increasingly called for autonomy within Czechoslovakia, the nation was effectively doomed. This was capitalized on by Austria, as Hlinka's Slovak People's Party, the main Slovak party, which was a right-wing clericalist one, supported joining the Habsburgs rather than remaining under Prague. Propaganda flooded Slovakia, while the church convinced their peoples to join Austria-Hungary. Both sides eventually ramped up their military as conflict was expected, so Stalin promised to support Czechoslovakia if Poland and Romania let them through. At this point, Britain and Poland intervened, as Germany and Austria used this as grounds to invade, claiming Czechoslovakia was in league with the Soviets. Diplomatically isolated, they were forced to hold a referendum supervised by Austrians, Hungarians, and Germans. And would you believe it, they overwhelmingly voted to rejoin Austria-Hungary. To cement ties with Poland, Zorge, stolen from the Poles in 1919 by the Czechs, was given back to Poland, as the Central Powers was reforged with Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Baltic Duchy, Bulgaria, Turkey, and Poland. Although the monarchy was restored in Austria, the Spanish Civil War was disastrous for conservatives. The communists received tons of aid from the French, Italians, and Russians, crushing Franco and his nationalist coalition, adding yet another state to the Comintern. Everyone was expecting a war, and tensions emerged over South Tyrol, as Austria maintained their claims to all former imperial lands and demanded Italy hold a referendum over the Germans that were oppressed under Italy. The communists in Rome discussed their actions with contemporaries in Paris, Madrid, Athens, and Moscow, and decided the time was ripe for war. A new Marxist paradise would soon rule across the entire continent, and soon, the globe. Who emerges victorious in World War II, the Central Powers or the Comintern? Let me know what you think happens in the comments, and if we can get this to 6,000 likes, I'll make a part 2. Click here to watch another great video, and I'll see you over there. Thanks for watching.